Hi, welcome participants. We have that it's noon now, Eastern, and we'll get started in just a few seconds. I see people entering the room. Welcome. For those of you just joining us, welcome to the All Hazards Consortium's Synchronizing Information for Disaster Response Logistics, Part 1. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to some.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to get started in just a few seconds. I see some more people joining the room. But if you have dialed in for the All Hazards Consortium, Synchronizing Information for Disaster Response Logistics, and more information about the Fleet Movement app, you're in the right place. All right, so I'm expecting a few more to join, but we're going to kick things off because we have a full webinar today. Again, welcome to our listeners. This is the All Hazards Consortium, Synchronizing Information for Disaster Response Logistics. And today we're going to talk about the strategy of disaster response logistics. This is a three-part series, and this is part 1, and we'll tell you a little bit more about our other parts in just a minute. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Laura Johnson, and I am the Director of Conferences and Events for the All Hazards Consortium. You're all muted and in webinar format today, so if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function or the chat box, whether it's to introduce yourself, to seek clarification, to add some of your own ideas and solutions, or again, to ask a question. We are recording today's discussion, and we'll be happy to send a copy to all the listeners today after this is over so that you can share it with your peers and colleagues who couldn't make it. So I just wanted to take a moment to go through what the next 90 minutes is going to look like today. We'll have about 10 minutes of opening remarks, and then we'll hear from Verizon for about 20 minutes on why synchronize information during disasters. We'll get a state use case for the next 20 minutes, and we have an expert from North Carolina Emergency Management Agency with us. And then for the third part of our speaker panelists, we'll talk about where we're taking it from here, again, as it relates to disaster logistics and synchronizing information. And then we'll leave about 15 minutes at the end of that 90-minute session for Q&A, for discussion. So we'll have plenty of time to hear from you and find out what you want to hear about some more. So today, our experts, our panelists include Kent Kildow, the Director of Business Continuity and Emergency Management with Verizon. We have Persia Payne-Hurley, the Private Sector Manager and BEOC Coordinator with North Carolina Emergency Management, and Greg McShane, Integrated Operations Division of Strategy, Policy, and Resources with DHS CISA. And then, of course, our Executive Director of the All Hazards Consortium, Mr. Tom Moran. And Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Let me welcome all of you. Really excited to have you all here from our panels. Each of our sessions are going to be kind of a dialogue. We did not want this to be kind of talking heads. We want this for folks to interact. And I can tell you from each one, Greg, Persia, and Kent have spent hours and hours and hours working this issue over years, right? Kent is the chair of the SICE working group, the Sensitive Information Sharing Environment. Greg's been a federal advisor to that process, and Persia chairs our state liaison working group, which is comprised of her peers around the country. So this whole thing is about bringing federal, state, and industry together so that we can synchronize information which coordinates operations, not on all things, but on a few things. And so what you're going to see today and really the next two webinars is how this is being done and has been done is a culmination of many years of work. This just didn't happen. We've been developing the trust framework and the data around this. And there's a lot of new folks on the line. So I just wanted to jump into a little background of who the heck's the consortium? What's the SICE? What is this, right? So for the next couple of minutes, just let me give you a little history. The consortium was started in 2005 by DC, Maryland, and Virginia, quickly spread to North Carolina, West Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, then Jersey, New York. And over the years, it's engaged emergency management and homeland security professionals on a number of workshops and problem-solving issues. And in 2010, the private sector approached DHS and said, "Hey, we're having issues coordinating with states." I think it was after Irene. Can we work together? So from 2010 to 11, you had all these little committees and work groups. And finally, in July of 2012, our board of directors had a meeting and invited a bunch of the sector reps. I think we had 8 sectors there. And at that meeting, they agreed to do a joint exercise in 2013 sometime. And a few months later, Sandy hit. Well, because these folks had built the trust through planning, they innovated on all kinds of information sources that had not really been shared. I won't get into all that today. There's another video I'll put in the chat. You can watch the long version of this. So fast forward in 2013, the Fleet Response Working Group was formed by the private sector under the OHATSA Consortium, because in Maryland, a 501c3 is exempt from FOIA. And they wanted to have real conversations private to government without fear of media and non-operational interference or blowback. So the Fleet Working Group was started. Fast forward to 2015, DHS Science and Technology got involved. We got involved with them in a grant, which gave birth to the SICE, the Sensitive Information Sharing Environment. The private sector copied the exact process that was being used in the defense industrial base through a partner we worked with called TSCP. And that gave the framework for the Sensitive Information Sharing Environment framework, legal and so forth. In 2016, DHS CISA got involved with that and provided funding through a Resilience Challenge grant for a couple of years, which basically formalized the SICE, the legal framework, the use case process, how we solve problems, and introduced the operational readiness level standard, how we rank data so that decision makers know when they look at a dashboard in the SICE, they can make a decision on it because that's the best data that's out there at the time on that topic, or it wouldn't be in there. In 2017, all this came together during the hurricane season, which was devastating, Harvey, Irma, Maria, and the SICE was involved with the working groups to coordinate hundreds and hundreds of crews moving from all over the country to the East Coast and the Gulf Coast to mobilize resources into Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And that was really when it became operational very, very quickly. 2018, number of meetings, the SICE Strategic Advisory Committee was set up, representatives from state. I know Greg and Persia are on that, Kent's on that. Federal, local, state, commercial entities governing the direction of the SICE, how it's going to run, where it's going, which brings us then to 2019 is where we actually invested as a consortium to support COVID into a major investment in an ESRI framework. ESRI gave us the technology that we needed to use to divide and separate people and data from each other so private sector could be rest assured their data would not get into the wrong hands. Then in 2020, we developed this app. All this app does is leverage about 2.5 million plus data sets into one place. And it answers the question is, how do I go from A to B and know what's in front of me as far as a threat and what's in front of me as far as a resource? And we've been building this through interviews and partnerships with industry over the years. So this app is the first of many that will be coming out. Now we have the ESRI framework to do that. So you'll see in the future dashboards and that, but they're really designed for 30-second decision-making, very quick, very fast, because the data is reliable. It's been organized for a specific use case. And in this case, it is looking at movement of resources across state lines by industry. So what is the SICE? The SICE is a simple legal framework. It brings together identity management, a legal agreement, and it separates people and information by use case. The best part of it is the components where it centralizes in one place a trusted framework. Let's go to the next cut. You can open it all up, Laura, just reveal it all. For planning, for rapid R&D, and information sharing. So to me, the most important part is the community. Some of these folks today and over the next 3 webinars are part of that community. They talk every week. There's information being shared all the time during events and not. But it moves very quickly. I won't get into all the details and all the solutions that they develop, but there's been over 100 different information solutions developed by this community, and it continues to grow every time there's an issue. So let's go to the last slide, Laura. So the Fleet Movement app, as I said, is a specific way of organizing data to answer the question for private sector as we're moving our supply chains, as we're moving our electric crews, what's in front of us, and how can we let states see that and synchronize with us, meaning probably the best example you hear from Persia may talk about it, but I know in Alabama, Bethany Elliott got access to this in early 2020 in the hurricane season, and she was just blown away. It gave her situation awareness she didn't have before. And as a result, Alabama shared more information we've seen from Alabama on transportation ever. And I think it speaks to when people kind of know what's going on, they want to help. And so this app just provides a place to do that. And there'll be many other versions down the road. But I'm really excited to have you folks on the webinar and learn today about some of the strategy behind it. The next webinar will be how the operational impacts of it. It isn't the only app. Persia's going to talk about her, in my mind, the best information sharing synchronization at the state level I've seen in 17 years. Phenomenal. She's going to talk about that. And then lastly, we'll talk about the technical webinar. We'll talk about the technical side of that because we've been working closely with Greg and Chris Vaughn at FEMA and in multiple states as we go forward. So I'm done with the introduction. I hope that was helpful, and I can't wait to jump into our topics. Okay, so first up, why is synchronization important? So we have spent a lot of time on this. So I wanted to have you hear from the chair of the SICE working group, Kent Kildale. So Kent, have you introduce yourself, and then I got a couple questions for you, and we can kind of start the dialogue.
All right, thanks, Tom, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today. My name's Kent Kildale. I was the Director of Business Continuity and Emergency Management at Verizon until just a few weeks ago. Currently the Executive Director for Physical Security and Employee Safety Programs. I've had the opportunity to be part of the All Hazards Consortium in general, and in particular the SICE Working Committee for the last 5+ years, and have enjoyed the opportunity to collaborate with both public and private sector partners to figure out how we make our responses more efficient and more effective. Tom?
Great. So first question, Kent, from an industry perspective, can you share your thoughts about kind of the strategy behind the SICE working group and how it approaches disaster problem solving using the SICE or use case with states and things like that?
Sure can, Tom. And I would first underscore our perception that the ability to have a good common operating picture with our partners, both in public sector and in private sector, is extremely important. And the SICE does provide that common operating picture across agencies and across industries so that everyone can have a perception or the same perception on where we are with the response. But the thing that I think differentiates the SICE is a true focus on not just identifying issues and discussing them, but really coming up with operational solutions for our response. Our goal across the board is to get everyone back to business as usual, to mitigate impacts from storms as quickly as possible. And I firmly believe that the quickest way to do that is to have good operational information. One of the things that's great about the SICE is not only is there that operational focus, but a very deliberate approach using a use case format where an issue is identified. The team works through what the potential opportunities or solutions are and really begins to put solutions in place that we can begin to leverage on a very quick and very efficient manner. I will use one of the examples from during the pandemic. There was an issue identified where some teams were having challenges finding personal protective or personal safety equipment. And as a result, the team quickly came together and was able to create an app where we could match people that had excess PPE or PPS with those who are interested in acquiring more and help address some of those issues. That was not something that took months and years, but really took weeks and just a couple of months to get in place and provide that as a solution to help progress on everyone's response to COVID-19. The other thing that I would underscore also, and Tom talked just a little bit about this, is a very deliberate approach to understanding the quality of data. And everyone has been exposed to good data and bad data. Sometimes I'm reminded of an ongoing contest that my brother and I had when we would go to the grocery store with our mother, and who could find the most outlandish headline on the tabloid newspapers. Well, that was information, but very low reliability in that. The ability to quickly understand the quality of information, extremely important. It helps you decide how much credence to put into that when making decisions, and our operational readiness levels approach to classifying data by the frequency of how often it's being updated, the maturity of the data set, how consistent and reliable it is. Great approach to help accelerate the ability to make decisions based on data that is available through the SICE. So just a couple of quick examples of how we are using through the SICE information that can be operationalized, shared across industries, as well as with both public and private sector, to enable organizations to make tactical operational decisions and advance your response to an incident as quickly as possible. Tom?
Ken, can you talk about for just a second here, why are the states important to be involved from your perspective? You have offices all over the country, right? So you're dealing with wildfires and hurricanes, tornadoes, ice storms. Can you talk about the role, from your perspective, the importance of the state EOCs and so forth? Why are they involved?
Absolutely, Tom. We consider state and even down to county level EOCs critical partners in the response. And that is a good two-way discussion throughout the response and the recovery. That we need to be sharing information with them on the status of our telecommunication network, so that we can understand, or they can understand, where there may be gaps in services. Not that we have very many of those, but sometimes it does happen after a major emergency. And we can understand where they may be needing additional telecom support because of the establishment of an emergency operations center, an evacuation shelter, or for our private partners, they may be standing up compounds to help deal with the response and the recovery. So that sharing of information through the state and sometimes county EOCs, extremely important to help move the entire response forward. The other thing that I would call out is, we've always seen the value of having a live person in an EOC to act as that liaison, but not every EOC is set up to support that kind of physical participation. And that was really compounded during the last year and a half as part of COVID-19, where safety protocols reduced the capacity or the ability for those EOCs to have public sector partners in the EOC, and the ability to safely and securely share information with the EOCs becomes more and more important as we go forward.
And Kent, last one, we talk about this a lot, this cross-sector coordination. I know within sectors, I came out of telecom, they're fairly organized. If competition doesn't take over, right, which happens. But can you talk for a second about the need for that cross-sector coordination certainly for hurricane season, and some of the challenges facing that?
I'll use a very real-world example. We, typically rely on our power industry partners to provide commercial power to the network, to our telecom network. When they are addressing issues as a result of a hurricane or another natural disaster, it becomes extremely important for us to understand at a very tactical level where they are working on things and where we should expect power to restore sooner versus later. And it gives us the ability to manage at the tactical level how we deploy generators, how we refuel our backup power systems, and where we need to be ready to follow in right behind the power industry. And if there is restoration work we need to do, that we're right on their heels. So that information sharing and that tactical ability to make the response as efficient as possible is extremely important. I use that as one example. We could expand that out into other industries and other sectors, but I think the example I used helps illustrate the importance of that cross-sector coordination.
Excellent. Thank you, Kent. Persia, good morning. Anyway, I wanted to have you introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into some questions and some free flow. So.
Hey, Tom. I really enjoyed what Kent was talking about. I'm Persia Payne-Hurley. I'm the private sector manager for North Carolina Emergency Management. I also coordinate our Business Emergency Operations Center, which is located inside the state EOC. I've been there now just a little over 7 years, and this is a program that was kind of started from scratch. So it's chicken wire and chewing gum, and has grown from there.
Very good. And she's not kidding, folks. Some of it has been brilliant innovation. So, Persia, first question to kind of kick it off from the state perspective, right? Can you talk about how getting everybody on the same page is so important when it hits the fan? Now, I don't know a state that activates more than North Carolina. Okay, maybe California, maybe with the wildfires, but you guys activate a lot. And I think it's important people understand the strategy of why is that important to synchronize these efforts, during game day, during a disaster.
Tom, to your point, we do activate a lot. I just happen to land in the state that activates the most. Not sure how that happened, but this has been a strategy, especially here over the last several years. We have found that erring on the side of safety has worked out well for us. So if we get surprised, by the hurricane that looks like it's going to be minor, and then it turns into greater or a lot of flooding that no one could have anticipated happen, we're already poised and we're already right there to help. As far as the real-time approach, we know that synchronization is so critical, especially in these large disasters, that you have to have all of the players. And when I started here, learning about the whole community approach, and we all talk about common operating picture, and I was hearing this everywhere, and it struck me in North Carolina, at least, that we used WebEOC so much for every activation, all types of communication. I mean, WebEOC is rolling right now in North Carolina. I mean, it is a 24/7, 365 technology that we use. So even day-to-day issues, an explosion here, a collapse there, those are being, moved around on WebEOC. An event is open there. And so in disasters, everyone is used to using WebEOC here. So I'm saying that because it occurred to me, when Director Sprayberry said that he wanted to get the private sector involved in state operations, and he wanted to really pull those relationships in closer to the state. He wasn't sure how he wanted to do that, but he was willing to follow a lot of recommendations that I had that were not necessarily traditional. And as a result, WebEOC, which my recommendation was to get that access to the private sector, was not necessarily widely accepted right away. And I'm going to say that, that was a big challenge for us here, because the traditional ideas of government working with private sector were not immediately embraced. But
Why was that?
well, I think it's culture, I guess. I think it's tradition and culture. I think a lot of the this idea of mixing private sector and government is something that is, kind of been frowned upon for a long time and still continues to be. So when I said, hey, we have got this common operating picture already operating in terms of government. And when I say that, I mean all of our counties and cities and all state agencies are tuned in to this technology, every single event. And it's real-time information and everyone is watching it at the same time. Everybody can give input to it, give AAR information, it's all going on. Why would the private sector not be a part of that if we're really committing ourselves to incorporating them into this state government process? So as much as I'm not sure that he thought I would suggest that Director Sprayberry agreed to try this, initially there was a bit of a pushback. What are we doing? This idea that maybe this is private information, which it is not, or that we ought to hold that closer, or that the private sector might speak to media, or these other things. And on this call, I think we all understand that when we talk about partnerships, at least in my mind, and this was my non-state government mind at the time, when we talk about partnerships, you got to put your money where your mouth is. So if I'm going to tell you that I want you to be my partner in this endeavor of disasters, hurricanes, whatever they are, then maybe I want to share with you all the information I possibly can. And that's where we get back to synchronizing information. So when we do that in North Carolina, we're talking about true common operating picture. Everybody on the same page, everybody watching the progression of an event at the same time. And we're talking about counties, cities, the state, private sector, utilities. We're talking about state agencies like agriculture and commerce and everybody. So if County A, and here's my little story, if County A, which this happened during Hurricane Matthew, says, hey, our water treatment facility is failing and we expect to lose water pressure in about 2 hours, and we're going to lose water altogether in 4, and they're posting that in an area in WebEOC where everybody can see it at the time of the event. Our private sector partners that were watching that, they had been following every county's post, all of state agencies' posts. They were following DOT, they were following National Guard, Highway Patrol. When that post came through from Cumberland County in this instance, everyone was aware of it at the time of need. Within minutes, in this case, the North Carolina Beverage Association responded and said, hey, you know what, Persia? We just want you guys to know that, some of our members, Coke, Pepsi, PepsiCo, some of the others, switching over to water right now and bottling. And in 3.5 hours, we will be ready to ship water wherever in the state you need it. And this was the first time that our BEOC got that kind of reaction in immediate. I mean, I'm talking about so fast. It made the state guys, their heads were spinning. And within that 3.5 hours, we were coordinating truckloads of water out to that county, out to those people, to shelters, to churches, wherever it needed to go. And we kept on for 11 days while the water rose after Matthew, coordinating those things. So that was private sector donations. That was coordination through the BEOC. That was movement that logistics not only could not have done, they couldn't have done it that quickly, and they couldn't have done it in that quantity. And it was allowed that county to slingshot into the recovery. While that was going on, they were doing repairs and testing the system and getting the water back up. So stability, back to normalcy. It was all of the things we talk about. So getting operational in that instance proved a number of things. How important synchronization of information was, how important it was to share information, how important it was to trust private sector, trust government, work together, that it was all happening to all of us. So we're on the same side. So a lot of different things there. And we had the technology and had it for a while. And all the states do, you guys, all the states. But I understand that maybe the risk that they feel and allowing private sector access to their information systems and WebEOC, I understand that. And I think that the size is a good alternative when you don't have that type of approval at a state to use a WebEOC technology, that you can use the size and still get that good information so you can make good operational decisions.
Persia, thank you. And we're in the next topic, we're going to get into detail. I can't wait for you guys to hear kind of this story behind it. But one of the things that I know about the North Carolina model, Persia and her logistics teams didn't have to do anything but watch. And that is a big issue for government because they don't have the resources, right? To respond to everything. And I thought one of the key strategies that we took by watching that is it takes time and trust. But I just love that story, Persia, because you were watching and probably synchronizing yourself, but you didn't have to get involved and approve a lot of stuff, right? That stuff was going right to the county and everybody saw it. It was great situational awareness.
And you need to know, Tom, you need to know too that if Cumberland County in that instance was going to wait for our logistics guys to supply the amount of water they needed, it would have taken them about 48 hours to get down to where those reserves are, to move that tractor trailer where it needed to be, a lot more resources for National Guard and other folks to transport that where it needed to go. I mean, we were moving water within 4 hours.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And again,
the logistics was able to look to other things to handle rather than trying to work on that big project.
Got it. Wonderful. Great. Greg, glad you could join us today.
Yeah, good afternoon, Tom.
Excited that Greg has been a key advisor to on a number of fronts. His background's in private. I'll let you introduce yourself, Greg, but you've got a unique perspective. You always do. And anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, sure, folks. Greg McShane. I'm with CISA Integrated Operations Division. I fall in the technical and facilities branch under the Chief of Staff. Within IOD, we have our CISA Central Operations. We've got our Intel groups. We have readiness, continuity, our operational planning, and then also now our regional operations. So it's quite a reorg that we've done in 2020. And we support all those aspects of technical facilities, from systems to build outs to any IT issues that arise, operations maintenance, and things like St. Elizabeth's build out. We're working those types of things right now. So,
right. And a lot of changes at DHS. I think Greg's had like 28 titles since we met.
Yeah, going on 15 years now, Tom.
Your background, you were in the electric sector for a while, right?
Yeah, I worked for Pepco for about 6 years, designing and building substations, and that was quite the experience. Back in the day, we built out the National Capital Region 500 kV loop with Brighton substation. It was took about 20 years to get the zoning approved to build it, and I was the lucky one that got to build it in a 5-year span.
Very good. Well, listen, Greg, I'm glad to have you on today from the federal perspective, from DHS CISA. And I don't want to leave FEMA out and some DOE and DOT. A lot of the federal agencies have a role here, but from an infrastructure standpoint, we wanted to have you involved. Plus, you've been a key stakeholder in the SITES working group. From your perspective, can you speak for a minute on the strategy that CISA is using to enhance their data efforts, right? Because there's a lot going on within FEMA and CISA on the data, and how the SITES, you see it, kind of being able to support that, right? There's a lot of work going on in all these different agencies. Give your perspectives on how you see the SITES is tying into that, or during a hurricane season. Certainly, this is.
Yeah, sure. So it's all the things that we've been working on, and Kent mentioned some of them. It's getting the right people at the table, the subject matter experts, the right processes, and the right tools. And then add to another fourth element to the recipe for success is the data and information that goes with it. All the aspects of data that can support a use case type study. We've done the whole fuel restoration, fuel availability, those types of things. What data is out there? What can support it? And what might be the best data available? We got into a little bit about the quality of the data. We could talk a little bit about that. But from a CISA perspective, there's been really a push within our CTO shop. We now have a chief data officer, and we're working all the data type issues, from identifying all of our inventory to cataloging that, to standardizing much of that data and information, and understanding that specific data that goes along with it. and then also, how does that data align with the things that we're working, whether it's supporting critical functions, critical infrastructure functions, use cases for the SICE. Those things are all kind of key parts of how we approach our data. And, we got into, CIS is really not into the business of ranking data or things to that extent, but we need to understand and identify how good that data is. Is it an authoritative data source? Is this the best data available? And then how does that fit into the equation to support a lot of your challenges within an operational environment, whether it's solving a problem or inputting information and data into your reporting. So within how does that tie back to the SICE? The SICE has developed a capability, operational readiness level. We really like that. It gets into a lot of the detail and criteria in ranking that data that might be out there. And they're building on the libraries of the data and information that can support an operational environment or response recovery. So those types of things within the SICE are very key, particularly in our public-private partnerships that we have, because there are things that we can do on the government side that we can do not as good on the private sector side. So feeds that we get from information that the SICE may be working, we leveraged a pilot GeoCollaborate's connection right into our CISA Gateway situation awareness tool in a geospatial format in a secure environment. And you turn on that geospatial feed and you can turn it off when you need to. So those types of things in building those capabilities are very key to success in moving forward. We understand it's a crawl, walk, run. We can only bite off so much of this as we need to. So it's prioritizing a lot of those types of things. What are the things that are repetitive, during a hurricane response? Obviously fuel restoration, fuel availability is a good one. But those repetitive type things, if we can build out capability so the information's already there and we can build off of the challenges, that's the way to go for us. So
yeah, thank you, Greg. And you mentioned the ORL standard. I want to give a shout out to Karen Moe and Dave Jones at the ESIP Federation. They're a great organization of 100 plus universities do research on data. So they're kind of data mining all the time. And the reason they became important was early in the fleet response working group, some data was provided to the electric sector, and it's really great data. Can we get it? Well, yeah, we're going to need another 3 years to develop it. And I remember John Shaner, the chair, Greg, said, "What am I doing with this?" Right? He was like, "I can't use this." And so we need to do it. So Karen was at NASA. I remember was a former NASA employee, and they had an ORL 9-step process, and they briefed the work group. And John made it, hey, 9 steps is a lot for me. How about 4? And they came up with the ranking of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1 is really good, 4 needs some more. And that became the foundation for that whole point. Every set of data is screened that way. It's really, really important. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I want to say thanks to ESIP and Dave Jones at GeoCollaborate as well.
And let me add to that, Tom. I mean, everybody's trying to build out the same type of dashboards, whether it's wildfire or hurricane. And, that's a lot of time and effort to do that. And if there's a way we can do this and channel it through the SICE and building out some of those basic dashboards and then feed them into your own watch operation and then overlay them with your key dashboards or information, that's very positive, and that's a win-win for everybody that's participating. So we spend a lot of time and information, a lot of time and effort, maintaining those connections with our situational awareness dashboards. Those things are constantly breaking. So if there's a way to do this collectively and collaboratively, that's on the table as well. So the feeds we get from SICE, we'd love to be able to post those within our situation awareness tools, and we put those on our knowledge walls. If it's something that's happening, it's key information that's up there, we're going to do that.
Yeah, and this is one Perge is going to go to in our next topic. But one of the big things I've noticed in my tenure is the federal agencies don't always have firsthand knowledge at the grassroots level of what's going on, right? At the top down is hard, especially during a disaster, right? if somebody's trying to get information from Persia and she's in the reaction mode, she's not going to be jumping on calls, and that's really hard. So, one of the long-term strategies is how can the site synchronize that state, federal, and industry at the same time? Not there yet, but that's kind of the big idea. So let's jump to our next topic. Really excited about this topic because I tease Persia all the time. Persia has this knack of coming up with stories and names. She puts her names on things. It's kind of funny. I'll talk about or bring one up. I'll have you describe. But anyway, Persia, I wanted you to help people understand you're not a government person, right? You came out of the Army, right? And I want to have you kind of bring folks in, tell them the story of how this started, but more importantly, from an information sharing, how you discovered a gap and how you plugged it, and then we can go on from there.
Tom, no, I'm not a state person. That was my background. I think, other than the Army, obviously operational and training command experience, this idea of state government and even emergency management, I was somebody that had zero experience. But maybe, I was able to see some things that did what, I suppose that might have occurred, certainly occurred to people, but going all the way to the wall maybe didn't. I need to say though, at the time that, I didn't realize how strange some of the things that I was suggesting. I didn't understand that was unusual. I didn't understand that, maybe for the good. So I guess I kind of had no fear in that regard, and it turned out to be a good thing. So as far as statewide information, I think that probably what we do, and I think we do it well, is we start off sharing as early as possible. So in a real-time approach, I start off by finding out what our plans are. I mean, why not let the private sector know if we're going to declare a state of emergency tomorrow? If I know about it, then I'm going to be letting them know. We expect to declare tomorrow, or we expect to activate, because the earlier the better that they receive that information, and they can put things in place and they can begin to prepare and do their own plans. So
and Persia, these partners aren't just the general public, right? You
No.
screen every one of these companies, and you say no to some and you say yes to others, right?
Well, Tom, I try not to say no. What we are careful about, and I think that this has been key, is that we're talking to the leaders. We're talking to CEOs, directors, corporate level. We're talking to operations people, logistics people, security, risk assessment, crisis response. These are the people that we're talking to. And so those people have an interest in building trust with us. And so it makes sense. So this is not everybody in a group or in an organization. We generally have 2 to 4 folks that have access to WebEOC from any one organization. Now, there are some folks that are a little bit different. For instance, Duke and Dominion combined may have 10 WebEOC users working with us, but that's because of all of the different areas that they're working in, likewise telecom. So the critical infrastructure folks certainly may have more than 2 users, say, on our network. But right now, our BEOC, I think I'm over 600 users now. And these are CEOs, owners, owner-operators. Those are corporate level decision makers or regional decision makers. For instance, with Walmart, since there's distribution centers near us, those distribution managers, likewise distribution managers for folks that are pharmaceutical manufacturers and those folks. So I'm trying to stick to your question. I think that in real time has been so critical because that is what makes our response so strong, so timely. It allows other folks to get in lockstep with us. That lag time that we sometimes get with reporting, it hurts you from the standpoint of how quickly you're able to help people and then stabilize systems. But if you're seeing it in real time, then you can better position yourself. And I think that's the big deal with WebEOC and why it works so well. I think that the size, And Geo Collaborate is going to be a mimic, I think, of that, in as much as that real time access. So, I'm thrilled that it's happening. You know, and with what we've done with WebEOC, we are hoping to, connect these in ways that are, going to boost awareness for our partners in North Carolina.
And Persia, within your NBOC program, it doesn't just include private sector, right? I think you have other government agencies, NGOs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is everybody. We take common operating picture and whole community very seriously. So it is NGOs, it is state partners, it's the North Carolina VOADs, it is private sector, it is cross sector. There are probably 11 or 12 sectors represented in WebEOC for us, private sector. Not to mention cities that are connected in North Carolina, especially our large cities like Charlotte, and towns, and of course, all of the 100 counties and the Eastern Band Cherokee Indians. The critical thing that we find is when you've got mutual aid going on county to county, just like we have mutual aid going on state to state, all of the counties being aware of what the other counties are doing, and those counties all being aware of what state is doing in state operations, and private sector able to watch all of that. Just a benefit I've got to mention, our private partners have learned over time kind of our battle rhythm, how we respond, how we do operations, how long it takes. They're beginning to learn us in a way they hadn't before. And they can absolutely gauge their operations and get them in step with ours so they can be faster. It's pretty magical.
So today it's pretty mature. Take us back to the first thing you did, right? You started this. What was the first capability you saw? Hey, we need this. I mean, you do like 7 or 8 different modules.
Yeah, I do about 7 or 8 capabilities of BEOC. I mean, the first one, information sharing, situational awareness, certainly. I've already mentioned, we try to give information as early as possible when we're activating, when that state declaration is coming down. Next, when I get that declaration in my hand, which is usually about 20 minutes after the governor signs it, it's out from me, out to the private sector. So information sharing, situational awareness, that was my number one. And it's the first thing that I did.
And did you open the spigot, Persia, to all government data or just specific government data when you first started? Did you open up the aperture for everything, or they can just see certain things?
You're talking about when we opened up WebEOC. I would say
when you first started with your situational awareness.
Yeah, this is going to make everybody. This is going to be interesting. That's an interesting question, Tom. But I'll tell you guys the truth, and that is, the first thing I did was I asked our IT folks. I told them I wanted a menu of every single thing possible on WebEOC, and then I went to my boss, Mike Sprayberry at the time, to find out what absolutely I'm going to get in trouble over. Now, what do I mean? I'm talking about access to stuff like nuclear power plant information. That's something that we're not going to be able to share.
Right.
But the interesting thing was there was very little that we couldn't. So I pushed that menu out to our private partners. And the first thing I offered was, hey, I will help you customize your view of WebEOC. They had no idea what was even in there. So we were discovering it together. Some people said, hey, you've got hospital boards. What is that? Let me take a look at that hospital board. What does it show? What kind of status? I mean, holy cow. So you're getting a direct feed from Duke. Wait a minute. Direct feed on outages in real time. Just the things that they didn't realize we even had data for. Greg was talking about the data. We have so much of it, I think, in government across the board. And sometimes we don't use it, or maybe we don't share what private sector wants. I didn't want to guess. So I just pushed it out to them and said, hey, what can we customize for you? And between the input we've got, I kind of picked out what their initial board would look like.
Right.
Now, some people chose things that nobody else cares about. And you know what I mean? I mean, if you want to watch shelter information, you can. If you want to watch hospital information, you can. If you want to watch Duke's direct outage feed, okay, go for that. If you want in on what NCDOT is inputting, so it just depended on you.
Right. So I as a member, let's say, you interviewed me, I just didn't show up at a website. I had to talk with you. I had an agreement. I signed an agreement, right? And then I would.
Well, it's interesting. We sort of embedded that in reentry certification. You know, we do statewide reentry certification. There's an MOA attached to that. That MOA is relatively simple, but it's asking you to be honest and respectful. It's asking you to be aware that this is information that you're privileged to have, that it isn't a right for you to have it necessarily, as far as operational stuff from the counties. And it asks you not to loot houses on Hatteras when you evacuate. You know, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
So,
but I make sure I talk to every single person that's got access to WebEOC, because we don't want folks that are not in the upper echelons to have that. We want the decision makers.
yeah, no, and I think that was key in a lot of states. I know that I've seen over the past struggle with that, because they assume private sector's vendors, right? And that's not the private sector you're talking about. You're talking about people that are operators of critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I have nothing to do with state contracts, state procurement, state vendors. I have nothing to do with that. I'm talking about, you know, operators. I'm talking about folks that are the decision makers, the folks that are the crisis response. You know, those are the folks that I want to talk to, the people that are interested in stabilizing systems.
Right.
Stabilizing business, minimizing loss, minimizing interruption. You know, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that's really key. I wish we had 3 hours I would love to drill into this, because I think you have provided us a lot of lessons learned at the ground level, right? And not only that, we come up with some interesting solutions. I wanted to turn to Kent and Greg for a couple of questions as well. And Persia, I'll come back to you in a second here. So Kent, how does a statewide model like North Carolina, and we know they're not all this way because they're all different, right? And these states are autonomous organizations, and they're just different, and we have to respect that. But from your perspective, how does a model like North Carolina impact, you know, industry's ability to prepare and respond, you know, for a hurricane? Let's take, for example.
Yeah, Tom, you know, a couple of points I'm going to build out from what Persia was talking about. The first thing she mentioned was access to information early. Having that as one of the tenets that they use allows us to focus less on gathering information in North Carolina, understanding that it's going to be provided to us. We don't have to go out and find all of it for ourselves. So it allows us to focus on other critical elements of preparation or response, knowing that we've got that strong partnership there. The second thing is the ability to leverage their WebEOC feed gives us the ability to stay very current with what's happening from the state's perspective and incorporate that into our decision-making process as far as preparation and response. Much better than waiting for a once or twice a day call and hoping that something is mentioned versus having it almost real time and being able to operationalize that. And one of the things that Persia talked a little bit about, but I would underscore as well, is the ongoing partnership. It's not just about you know, black sky days during a response, but we know that partnership there is year round. We train and exercise with Persia and her team to make sure that we're staying aware of each other's, you know, operating processes and capabilities, and that it's not something that we're figuring out during the first hurricane of the season or what have you, that it's that ongoing dialogue and partnership that's happening year round. So I think those are three of the big items that I would call out and share with this team. You know, the other thing, Tom, is you are absolutely right. Not every state is the same. And so for my peers in the private sector, going out and understanding how your state or operating states are handling these kind of relationships, very beneficial to do that on an ongoing basis. I would tell you that the states engaged through the All Hazards Consortium are making it easier and easier to partner with. Some of the states are a little less forward leaning in that area.
And Kent, you mentioned something I think is really important is the exercises. Persia, can you talk for a minute? You use exercises regularly as a way to onboard new folks, but you also listen and you actually do something about the feedback you get, right? Many of the applications you developed, I know, have come out of these exercises. Can you talk about an example of how you use exercise, how often, and what are some of the solutions you all have developed? I love the lodging one, right? The one you talk about lodging. And can you talk about the exercise process, the frequency, and then how do you use that to develop capability within WebEOC?
Oh yeah. I mean, Tom, we exercise a lot. We have found that the more we exercise, the better we get. Like anything else. But I think that this has been good for all of us, and I'm talking about private and public, because we're learning so much from each other. I mean, the private sector has taught me so much, not only how they operate and about capabilities, because we uncover so many capabilities every time we try to do a thing, but also their response times. So in terms of exercise right now, I mean, generally we have a statewide exercise. That's a functional exercise. It is graded, it's evaluated. Our private folks are invited to those, and they have been since, I guess about 8 months after I started, we began to invite them. And so we're talking about real time. We try to make the exercise scenario very challenging. Private sector is piped in with WebEOC. They're listening to county briefings. There's tactical information. It's everything that you possibly could have in a normal situation, and they're responding to that. We also do, not a big one every year, but we also do monthly WebEOC drills. Every month, it's a 2-hour drill. There's a scenario, every month is different. I encourage our partners to send to me what your organizational standards for business continuity and crisis response. What are your standards? How many exercises do you need to do a year? Do you need particular scenario information? Do you need particular injects so your people, your team can respond to those for required tests and exercises you have to do? I mean, this could be that requirement, fulfill that requirement for those groups. So I've opened it up for that, and we can tweak those exercises for a sector or for a group so that they can meet those requirements. And the counties are in on it. That's the beauty of it. The counties are in on it, putting in their responses to what is happening. So that's a real nice scenario. It's an exercise builder because we learn from every single exercise, but it also uncovers capabilities we didn't know about and capabilities that we had that they didn't know about. The other thing is we do a BEOC TTX, which is a tabletop exercise. We didn't do one in 2020 because a lot of things were postponed. Director Sprayberry had been facilitating that, and that was his time to go through a scenario, and he liked to get face-to-face with all of the partners. And we typically would have about 70 companies represented at that. So we do exercise a lot. But it works out because then there's no shock when that disaster comes. It's muscle memory, and that's what we want.
And you're exercising on the tool you use in the real game role, right?
Every time.
Which is brilliant. And I just want to put a plug in for the group working this. The Fleet Movement App team, Persia's on the exercise committee for that, along with Lumber States and private sector. They're copying that model that you started, right? So they're going to build an exercise around the Fleet Movement App for that exact reason. Because your model has just, why reinvent the wheel? It works. You do it all the time, and I appreciate your involvement on that. Greg, let me jump to you for a question here. From really DHS FEMA perspective, I don't want to speak for FEMA, but that from the federal perspective, how does the federal agencies benefit from systems like this, right, in their operational information efforts, right? North Carolina, just one example. There's probably many. Can you talk to that for a minute? Why that grassroots, knowledge is critical at the federal level?
Yeah, sure, Tom. And that's a great question. Obviously, from a CISA perspective, definitely we need access to it. It's a great resource. the SICE and All Hazards Consortium work a lot of those problem sets that aren't worked at our levels at all the time at that level. Getting into the weeds of that, we stand up, tiger teams, work groups to handle that, but they also get disbanded. So you are a part of that, the continuity to that, and you're constantly pushing the envelope on those types of problem solving, whether it's on the fuel side or the lodging or pre-staging, those types of things. And we want part of that, and we know that you guys have been working them and have taken them to the next level. So that's advantageous to CISA. We get things that come up even during COVID. Hey, are things that just one-offs from our CISA leadership. Hey, I want to minimize the impact to the supply chain. I want to know everything. So it's a scramble from our perspective, and going to the those resources that we know are authoritative, those resources that can answer some of those questions or help us down that path. So, just a good example of what we spun up last year with the routing application that we developed in response to COVID. Identifying a lot of those types of restrictions in a tool that we were able to operationalize, and it was useful for not only our customers but for the truckers. That was a huge success in our mind, in response to that. So those types of things, and where we really need to expand on and those touch points is that in areas such as ESF 14, where it's a lot of that sector, cross sector dependency, interdependency challenges that we've got. The membership within All Hazards Consortium is very much part of that, and can help us answer some of those challenges and questions that do arise. So
one of the things I've observed is the federal government agencies aren't going to do nothing, and if they don't know, right, they're going to do something. They have to, right? And I just think the more they know, I forget who said it. There was a kind of do no harm, right? Let's help, but let's not get in the way. And I think I know, Kent, from your perspective, you've kind of seen this from day one, is that if we can get everybody working off of Persia's playbook, we're all better, right? We get everybody working off the state during a disaster, right? We're all better informed. And I think that's been hard to do over the years, but I think it's getting there. Persia has a model. The SICE is looking to connect op centers through an initiative called SICEnet. There's many initiatives on, but I think you said something really important, Greg, and that is if we help our federal partners know what's going on as close as we can, they can find ways that really can matter when they put the resources to bear, because they have so many.
Yeah. And standing up those repeatable processes is very key. Making those connections, whether it's to the states, to the utilities, and it doesn't have to be through the SICE or All Hazards Consortium. It could be many different ways. But we have our ESF2 comms, industry contacts that we work hand in hand with. But we also have ESF 14. We have folks down at the NRCC in FEMA. We've got our PSAs, protective security advisors, in the state EOCs when we surge or during an event. We have special events type capabilities that we work day in, day out. So, there's many ways to kind of skin the cat on this one here, but if we can set up those repeatable processes, we'll be better off. And like you say, we exercise, we train to them. And, when it gets to that level of, oh my gosh, you know what, this is right in the All Hazards Consortium strike zone. This is where we're going to go.
Great. Thank you. Wow. I got like 20 more questions on this since we're talking here, but I'm going to go to the next topic. All right. So topic 3, we're on time. We're tracking. So where is the SICE or the Fleet Movement app or other versions of this kind of data? Where is this going, right? So we want to get into a little discussion with our panelists on what's going on today and where to see that going. So Persia, I'm going to start with you. And a big part of the SICE is the state involvement. And I remember several years ago, I got a call from Mike Sapone, the chair of the Fleet Response Working Group. And he said, Tom, we have got to coordinate better with state EOCs nationally, but let's look at the hurricane. And I remember specifically, Persia had a small group that she was networked with at the time. And there were crews coming down from Canada. Remember this story, Persia? And Charissa Cooper was your counterpart in Maryland. And within 30 minutes, connections were made, and the lead driver of the truck was contacted by the state police in Maryland and said, when you get to our station, we'll wave you through it. All that happened within like 30 minutes. It was amazing. And that's when Mike called me. We had a call with Persia, and Persia said, look, why don't, if you guys can support it, facilitate, why don't we pull together a small group to work within the Fleet Working Group of states? And that gave birth to the State Liaison Committee, which chaired by Persia and co-chaired by Edie Casella out of Illinois. Persia, can you talk about that group for a minute, what it does and how the SICE has helped maybe support and strengthen that group, and where you kind of see that going?
I can, Tom, as Tom mentioned, it started out with a group of my counterparts. I've been honored to be able to mentor about 10 or 12, maybe a few more now, as they're getting their programs off the ground or they're getting started. And this, to kind of paint the picture of the situation, so you guys are aware, I mean, the private sector position in most states, unfortunately, it's not one that people typically homestead in. This is more of a revolving door. So there's always new private sector folks that are dropping into that spot at the state level to, and then they're told, build a program, and figuring out what they want to do, how they want to interact with the private sector, how to engage them, all of these different things. And with very little training formally done, typically they'll end up coming to visit me or talking to me in some way. What Tom and the All Hazards Consortium did for me was allowed a bit more organization to a regular standard discussion among those states. So it helped me so much because I wasn't making 8 or 10 calls a week or in 8 or 10 discussions a week with the various states that were in different stages of the development of their private sector programs or BEOCs. And so what's happened as a result, that just started out as a little get together with the help of the All Hazards Consortium, we've come up with different questions, not just the mentoring and training that's happening, but different questions that come up among the states, a communication and a mutual support among the states that has really helped move things along. So, I mean, I can give you an example of a state that, maybe their private sector liaison doesn't have the partnerships that mine has, or that California's has, or that Louisiana's has, but they can drop in and say, hey, I'm looking for a contact at, X company because this thing is happening in my state. And it could have to do with wildfires. It could have to do with fuel. I mean, gosh, we even had questions in this collapse in condo in Miami of how they could get certain specialized companies involved in that, and they needed that kind of help. But through that liaison committee, we were able to connect those folks up with people that could help, even though it was a county level event. So you can imagine, we can do it on a small scale or on a large scale. So the kind of questions that come up and the kind of use cases that come up are born out of real events. And I think that's what makes them so relevant, Tom, that they're born out of real experiences, like, from fiber cuts that happened during actual hurricanes, to holy cow, what do we do about lodging in the event of a disaster when there's left? And so Tom is talking about a lodging situation that we had where my partners, North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association, I talked to them, what can I do to get a step ahead of this drain on hotels when we're bringing in, when people are evacuating and federal partners are coming in and other folks are coming into the area to try to help, and the hotel rooms are going away in a blink. And yet we need doctors and nurses and swiftwater rescue teams coming in to help us. We need someplace for them to stay. Well, when they started talking to me about, hey, we think we can help you with that, suddenly I had access to real-time information on hotel availability. And this was not coming from a third-party travel company, but coming from owners of saying, hey, we've got 12 rooms here or 10 rooms there, and allowing me to grab those for our special teams and our doctors and the people coming in through EMAC. I mean, it was huge. So it opened up, though, an avenue for us we didn't have before, and those hotels were getting real-time information from us. So that exchange win-win all the way around.
And I think people need to understand what makes this work is people. It isn't data. It's not Esri. It's not process. It's all humans.
Right.
We're trusting, working together. A lot of people don't know this, but Persia mentors a lot of people that are new into their state's program. And she gives her time. This isn't a funded part of her job. She just does this. And I know a lot of—
No, Tom, that's not entirely true. You know, I put it in the chat. The currency is cupcakes and Oreos. You know, you got to understand the currency if you're going to operate in this space. But I want to just make a quick point, if I can, please, and that is, I can't emphasize enough what we do routinely here in North Carolina, and that is we're always asking the private sector, what do you need? And we ask it, and then we listen, and we actually act on that input that they give us. If somebody says, hey, I really would like to have access to, say, I don't know, status of hospital emergency rooms. Well, if you're a pharmaceutical manufacturer, or if you're a distributor, that's great to know. You know, I'm listening to that, and I'm going to try to get that for you. I feel like it's my job. So listening to what they need, and also we collect AAR items while the hurricane's going on. It's kind of too late in the game after the hurricane is over, and let's bring everybody together. I've forgotten it already, you know, the blur. Right. But to give them a place to put those items, hey, right now with this going on, I wish I had X, or I wish I had access to Y. And we're reading those, and somebody is answering. And if we can fix it right now, even while the water is rising, why don't we do that?
Yeah, well, and I think, Marcia, what's great about your heart about it is you share that with your peers freely. And I understand it builds a good network and so forth, but I just love your heart about mentorship, because at the end of the day, none of us are going to be here forever. And we got to pass this on. And some of it just isn't a process, it's a feel. It's a culture.
It's true.
Right?
And some of these ideas that I have, sometimes I get ideas and they may not apply here, but they apply for another state.
Right.
So sharing that to give them a boost in what they could do in their program is going to help everybody. And so that's the name of the game.
So we're going to, Persia and I've talked, we're going to do another webinar, a deep dive, if you will, into Persia's BEOC program, the technology and how she does that. I can say this to everybody, and a lot of the principles behind the sites have been borrowed from North Carolina and Florida and Texas, and we've watched this, and we just believe, our board believes that it's a local. It starts at a local and works its way up. And so it's really important that we mimic these processes best as we can. So, Persia, thank you. Greg, let me throw a question at you for a minute. How do you see? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. How do you see, Greg, the SICE framework kind of helping DHS and other federal agencies coordinate together, right? As well as, during a hurricane, for example, how do you see this help them working together? And where do you see that over the next maybe 2 to 3 years as these use cases develop further?
Yeah, Tom, you hit it on the head, and you mentioned use cases, and I think that's the key there. We've tackled a number of use cases that are beneficial to the states, the feds, a lot of the utilities there, whether it's damage assessment or things that kind of fall in that category, which span across everyone. So, I see the SICE as kind of that situational awareness capability that can be leveraged by all of them. All members, as well as CISA, and really that's one. We do quite a bit on the physical side. Areas that we cross over is on the cyber side, as well as on the comm side, which is very mature on one end, but yet there's certain restrictions that are associated with communications. So getting around some of those hurdles is a challenge, whether it's on the federal reporting, whether it's protected critical infrastructure information, traffic light protocol reporting that's yellow or red. So there's restrictions of what we can share, what we can't share. So if there's a way we can work with that and understand what we can share with the SICE and what is kind of done behind the federal wall, those are things we need to sort through. We have great capability that is shared at certain levels, whether you're at FEMA, the National Response Coordination Center. We have infrastructure of concern reports that we publish that are done internally. We'd like to kind of see if we can do that at a reduced level and share with more of our members and partners. There's infrastructure outlook reports in a lot of the forecasting that goes into it. Our National Risk Management Center has great capability that we publish outlook reports on forecasting. So those types of things, if there's a way we can do that, and even on the data front of what data we can share, what data we can't share, when I talk that, it's data sets, things that we can connect with the SICE, in a geospatial format, or it's a spreadsheet or something to that level. We need to kind of go through and identify what those protocols are. So, in the next 2 to 3 years, those are things, tackling additional use cases, challenges that we have moving forward. Those are things that are on my radar. So I'd like to see, from a system perspective, more resources put on it. But again, there's challenges there. But again, we have a great relationship with the All Hands Consortium, and we want to keep building on that. So
great, thank you, Greg. Kent, can you speak to the SICE Net initiative? So much of the SICE isn't going to be the Death Star. I think the private sector doesn't want that. But on certain use cases, it becomes this kind of brokerage that connects private, public together. You've been involved in certainly from the beginning, the SICE Net initiative. I think we're looking to connect a state to Dominion and maybe a variety, in other words, to share information on damage assessment. Can you speak for a minute about how it helps this synchronization on these use cases that really involve state and multi-sector coordination, right?
More than happy to, Tom. We talked a little bit earlier today about the evolution of willingness to share information across sectors within the private sector and public-private as well, and making a lot of progress there. But there are still some data sets that people aren't completely comfortable with sharing with the larger group, and creating a safe environment where both public and private sector agencies can decide what information that they're willing to share that's a little bit above and beyond anyone can see it, and pick who can see it and for how long they can see it. Answer some of those questions that up until just recently we really couldn't get past. Who's going to have access to the information? Who's going to have, where's it going to be stored, and who will be protecting it as it goes forward? And so the SICENet kind of answers all three of those big questions and creates the opportunity for even more information sharing as we go forward. I do believe that in general, there'll be additional data sets or information that's made available to the entire population or team, but there'll be some things that are a little more sensitive, a little more tactical, and it's going to make sense to share them with select partners versus the broad community. And SICENet is going to give us that capability as we go forward.
Great. And lastly, Kent, from an industry perspective, where do you hope to see this go maybe over the next couple, 3 years? I mean, we're still, I'd say we're not infants, but toddlers, I think, in the long term.
That's a great way to describe it, Tom. And I think we're really at an inflection point at this time where public and private sector organizations are seeing a greater need for information sharing. And some of that is already starting to happen. More of that will happen over the next few years to give everyone the ability, oh, excuse me, give everyone the ability to more effectively respond to disasters. And that's going to come through information sharing that creates operational and actionable intelligence that people can incorporate into their response and make their responses more effective. And I think we've talked about the progress that's been made over the last few years and a little bit about the vision as we move forward and continue to enable those capabilities.
Very good. Thank you. We could go on, but we're going to pause here. Laura, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and we can move into some discussion and Q&A and then wrap up.
Okay, thanks so much, Tom. And also thank you to Kent, Persia, and Greg for the input. Extremely interesting and valuable. I just want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in Q&A. We do have one here from Steve. What are you seeing for ops, interops, OPSEC with state fusion centers? Who wants to take that one?
Laura, I missed the question. Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, what are you seeing for ops, interops, OPSEC with state fusion centers?
Hey, Laura, I'll tell you what we're seeing. Our state folks, especially the SBI and cybersecurity folks that operate in the Fusion Center, are really beginning to get, in my opinion, that these have to be relationships where you're not making a fourth date request on the first date. Maybe you'll get more information that way. And so that was a big thing that came out for them, I think, during the Colonial Pipeline disruption, because there was a lot of information that they wanted immediately and right now. And unfortunately, they were going directly to some companies that were involved, and there was no information sharing happening because those were fourth date requests. So I'm going to say that, and I think Kent might have some great deeper insight, but whatever the area is, especially one that is so critical and prickly as our fusion centers, information is not going to be just jump up on demand because you've asked for it. And from the government standpoint, and they're learning that. So I'm glad they're learning that.
Yeah, Persia, you really do raise a good point there. And it is getting both the public and the private sector more comfortable with information sharing. I would say that the states and the federal government are doing a great job of moving from just a regulator or regulated relationship. And we clearly understand that those responsibilities are still in place, but also creating a collaborative partnership where we can work together to address issues, both physical and virtual or cyber, if you'd prefer. And I'll give kudos to Greg and CISA for the great work that they have done on the cyber side of really stepping into the public-private partnership, providing more support. And I know that at Verizon, we have a very strong relationship with CISA when it comes to cyber issues.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, for that. But I can't take credit for that. But I do. Confirmation of that is on our Friday calls, our All Hazards Consortium calls. When Sean, from Pennsylvania, chimes in with all of the information and data that he's providing, is unbelievable. And he's, I learn a lot from it too. So it's fantastic to hear that. So.
Okay, panelists, Scott would like to know if you have any gaps in collection of real-time power outage data from utilities. He says many other states are not as fortunate. Most do not have comprehensive collection. Only a few state EOCs collect data directly from utilities. So do you have any gaps in collection of real-time power outage data from utilities?
Laura, I'll start that one. We've got a pretty good view, but I would not say it's a perfect view. Obviously, it is a number of organizations and legal setups that different power providers have. Some are good about making information available, and others, because of either internal decisions or their capabilities, there's just less information that's available on a real-time basis. So my perspective, we've got a strong understanding of what is happening on a commercial power availability perspective during a response, but we also understand that it is not a 2020 view of what's happening out there.
Okay, great.
I think one comment from my perspective, having worked with enough utilities, is this is, as Persia calls it, this is a fourth date question, right? This is not something utilities, in my opinion, it's difficult for them to share. One, it's dynamic. It changes moment to moment. And many times situations occur when somebody gets data and acts on it and it's changed, but they didn't go back to look at it. And now they blame the utility. So it's very dynamic, number one. And number two is, in Persia, in your case, you've got the trust with your utilities where they provide you the live feed. For most everyone else, it's a public website, which they maintain, right? And they're under a lot of pressure to share this information. I think as time goes by, Kent, you're right, it will get, they will find ways to keep people informed, but this has been very difficult to change because so much of that information gets used against them in the wrong way by media in the past and things like that. I think that's changing, but this is tough information to get because utilities, this can be very sensitive, and they're just like any business, they're cautious.
Yeah, Tom, I think we've been fortunate in that regard, and there is quite a bit of trust, and these are long-term relationships where we've been able to get direct feed from a number of our utilities, and that's Duke Dominion for our state, Duke Dominion Electric Cities, and our electric co-ops, which handle our rural areas. So, but I think we've been fortunate in that regard. I'm hopeful that that can happen in more states, certainly in our region.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, great, thank you, panelists. Those are all the questions that came through today. And Tom, did you want to?
Yeah. If you want to learn more, I put in the chat these links. There's a couple of resources, and I'll put a pitch in for the Fleet Work Group. One, they maintain a blog on this app. This is an extensive review of how it was developed, how it's being used. The link is in there. And then they've also got a subscribe site. Some business, if you're a business, if you're a company and you want to learn how to use this hurricane season, there's a link there. You can learn right about it and you can subscribe. You get cost information, so forth, if this is of interest to you. And lastly, if you want to learn more about the consortium, you can go to ahcusa.org and look at some of the key initiatives going on there. You can join, become part of the community and get access, not just to this app, but to all the other ones that are coming out in the future. So like I said, this is the first one. There'll be many coming out. Now we have our partnership with Esri put in place. We're working on a number of different products for specific use cases where the data is organized to meet the need of the specific problem, right? So Laura, that's it. I'll turn it back to you. I know we got a couple extra slides here we'll go through.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention, again, you may have heard me say in the beginning that this is the first of a series of 3 virtual discussions on this topic. So on Wednesday, July 14th, we're going to share with you the operational uses, and that's going to be at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then on Thursday, July 15th, also at 10, we'll do a demo of the app and tell you a little bit more about the technical approach to this. So if you haven't registered for these 2 others, we invite you to do so. You'll see the link right here on the screen, ahcusa.org. Just go under our events tab. As always, these trainings are free. So if you like what you saw today, you want to have some more information, feel free to join us for those. We welcome you too. And again, just wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists for your input. Tom, thank you as well. And also thanks to all of our listeners for dialing in. We hope that you found some valuable information out of today's discussion, and we'll be sure to send you the recording so you can share it with others. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.